Friday stuff. So I said at the end of the last stream that we did all the programming we needed to do, but I totally forgot to add onto this to-do list one of the fairly actually more important things I need to have in this project system, which is good feedback to the user. I have like all the critical stuff that is absolutely like failure to parse stuff comes out as errors already, and we've tested that. But there are slightly higher level errors that I could report to the user to let them know that something critical is wrong that I'm not reporting right now, and that's going to make it harder to use the system, I think. So the goal is, before I do the tutorials, I want those errors in place because I want a part of the tutorials to involve explaining how to respond to different errors. If you see this error, look for these mistakes, kinds of suggestions. And I can't do that if I don't have those errors like figured out. What do they actually look like and working? I need to be able to demonstrate them. So we're going to get those put in. Let me switch over there. There we go. Okay. We want to go to where should I go first? Actually, I think. Whoops. Config. Config is where we should start. Okay. I have like this light from the sun on me right now, like right in the worst spot possible. I don't know what I should be doing about it. Just screw it. I'm just gonna have light right here, and you guys are just, deal with it. It hurts my eyes too. Okay, that's all I can say. It's not just you guys that are suffering. So we want to figure out the best place to introduce these extra errors. So after parsing a compound, if we successfully parse a compound, then there's a spot right here where I want to do config parser compound check context. So that's not actually going to generate any new data. It's just going to produce some errors if something bad happened inside this compound structure. Then we'll test this. And then there's one other place where we want to look at maybe adding errors. Adding error messages, I should say. We don't really want to introduce errors. That sounds a little bit like a bad idea. Okay. Okay, so now what we want to do is just a quick iteration over this, and by quick I don't mean in terms of how long the computations will take, I mean in how long it will take me to write. Damn it! This is taking way longer than it should. Jeez, okay. I'm not in the flow right now, guys. Okay. So, that visits all the nodes. Okay. And then what we want to do is we want to check the layouts, because what's not allowed inside of a compound, let me pull up an example here. It's not allowed during a compound. See right, this one right here is a good example. So these don't have a label. They're just put there, and then this one has a label. The unlabeled ones are basically getting an implicit .0 equals, and then the next one gets an implicit .1. After the unlabeled ones have passed, After you see the first labeled one, you can't go back to unlabeled. So it's supposed to be like you have unlabeled ones and then labeled ones. Now, I didn't make that a part of the grammar, which I could have done. Right? We could have had the grammar say that we first have a list of unlabeled things and then a list of labeled things. I didn't want to do that because, well, mostly because I want it to parse even if you don't follow this rule. I want it to be allowed, or not allowed, but I want it to be that if you were to make this mistake and you went like Alan desktop or whatever, right, and you put an unlabeled thing in right there, that it would still parse and give you something. I don't want to have too many failure cases where it goes, I can't make a project out of this file. I want it as much as possible to try to make a project file from the thing that it's given, or a project. Like, I want it to build a project structure that it can run a project from as often as possible, even if there are mistakes, so that you don't end up in a situation where like you have some error in your project file and now the project file won't load, and so this is especially true for config files where you want to edit your config file with the editor that won't load the config file. So I'm trying to have it be as like as much error recovery as possible. So for the purposes of error recovery, the grammar allows this. But this is actually ignored. It doesn't match to anything once it sees it. It just parses and then it gets ignored. But I want an error or I want a warning to get emitted when this happens, so that, or an error really. I want an error to get emitted so the user knows they've made this mistake and can go correct it right away, right? Because otherwise, what I've noticed happens is, especially this one, the one where I get it the most is right in the current project system is right here. I forget to label the command one, even though these are all labeled, and then I'm like, why won't it do anything? And the reason is because I forgot to label it, and there's no error right now. So the goal is to just say implicit index allowed equals true. If node, and then I need to swap. So that was me explaining to you what we're working on. So let me take a look here. Layout. If layout type equals config layout type unset. Okay, if it does not equal that, then implicit index allowed becomes false. Else, if an implicit index is not allowed, so we see it, so we see something that's not unset, it's got a label, then it's no longer allowed that we can in the future see unlabeled things. Here we say, okay, well, else, therefore it must have been unlabeled if the index is not allowed, if the implicit indexes are no longer allowed, then we need to emit an error. Config parser log error context, and now the error will be implicit or unlabeled element in compound after labeled what do I want it to say? I want it to say something useful, not cryptic. Encountered unlabeled member after one or more labeled members. There we go. I am feeling like putting ABBA on again would be appropriate right now, given my level of focus and tendency towards hyperness. The ABBA music would amplify the hyperness I already have while helping me focus and be slightly less talkative. But I'm gonna give it. I'm gonna let it brew for another few minutes while we work on this, because it's not actually. The thing is, this is not gonna last very long. The work we have to do here, so I don't want to get too deep into a flow and burn that energy. If I do that once, I can't do it again for a couple of days. Alright, I'm going to take a moment to answer an interesting question, which I don't actually have a necessarily good answer for. Is it good to practice to make it work first, then rewrite, or write it well the first time so you don't have to waste time refactoring? There's a lot of like details that go into answering that question. It has to do with a couple of factors. So one is how familiar are you with the kinds of thing you're writing? For instance, I very recently started working on building a suffix tree in something I was working on, and I've never written an algorithm for linear time suffix tree construction before, and it's a fairly sophisticated and finicky kind of problem that's easy to make little mistakes on that are hard to debug and hard to catch with a test. So I worked very slowly up to it. I didn't rush into it. I built a suffix tree builder that was correct, that ran an n-cubed time. And then I wrote the linear time one so that I could compare them and make sure that they're matching and all and then fed lots of input into it just to try to find a mistake, because it's the kind of thing where I know that I don't have a lot of experience with it. I don't know where the gotcha bugs are that I'm likely to have because I haven't written a bunch of them. I haven't written any of them. And once you've written a bunch of those, like once I've written that 3 or 4 times, I maybe know where the most likely bugs are that I'm going to produce, and I know what the code is generally supposed to look like anyway, so I've already like gotten used to not making several basic mistakes. And so then I might just sit down and write it, the linear version, day one and just go with it. But you have to approach it with that factor in mind. How familiar are you with the thing you're writing? It's totally acceptable and like appropriate to write something with the plan of rewriting it if you have no idea how a good version of this will look, so that you kind of know you're starting from a base of here's a thing that works, and then write the more sophisticated versions to compare to that, or use that as a stepping off point to understand the more sophisticated versions. Another time when it's reasonable to start with an easy version and upgrade is when you don't fully understand the full feature set you're going to want. So for instance, the project system we used to have, I wrote it and now I'm revamping it. This is a little bit different than what you're asking, because when I wrote that project system, I didn't fully understand all the features I would want in the project system. So I didn't go too deep into it. I gave it I used an existing config parsing system I already had, and I just did some of the basic stuff I could easily think to do at that point, right? After having used it for a long time and getting a very clear idea of what I actually want, it now makes a lot more sense to go in and really do it for real on a second pass, because I actually know what features I want in something. So that's a different thing that can happen, and judging when you're in that situation is much harder. It's very easy to think that you've got your feature set figured out now, and so you should write the real version now. And right now, even I'm still leaving room to do a rewrite in the places where I'm unsure, but in the places where I have confidence that I know what's going on, I'm doubling down a little bit more. So like for instance, I know for sure that I want a text format now, and that I want to be able to like parse it. So I went and did the full parser, like I did a hardcore one rather than just a hacked one, because I know for sure that that's the route I want to stick with. On the other hand, I've been a little bit less heavy-handed with, for instance, how do I determine which commands to use. Like, I considered, if I look at my project system, right, to determine which command to run and which paths to load, I'm just looking at what operating system is this on right now, which I considered other options that were more heavy-handed in terms of, maybe I want every computer every computer I run on to have a unique name that I give it in a config file, so that no matter which computer I'm running on, I have a unique name for it, and then I can determine which commands and which paths I use based on the computer and not based on the operating system, so that I could have, for instance, 2 Windows machines, both with different configurations. But I decided not to implement that because I felt a little bit too. It felt like a little bit too far of a prediction into the future of what things I might want. Right now, I don't need a feature like that, so I'm not implementing it. And I picked a feature that I knew would be easy to like have work in side by side with that, which is this operating system flag instead, right? So there you go. if you can write it, if you're confident, you've done it a couple times, and you aren't at all unsure about either the implementation or the actual purpose of the code you're writing, then go ahead and write the fully sophisticated thing now. But otherwise, write the easy thing and use that as a stepping stone for either rewriting it right away or rewriting it in the future when you're more sure of what you need to do. That's my suggestion. There might be more advice that someone could generate on that, but it's something I don't actually have a lot more thought on besides what I just gave, which I feel like is kind of the obvious advice. Write the thing you know how to do well, and iterate when you know you need to do better, I guess. Most of this comes down to like a judgment call of how much confidence do you have that you're right, and getting good at that judgment call is just something you have to practice. I can't really give you a formula to execute in your brain to figure it out. You're going to have to develop that judgment skill for yourself by practice. Alright, so let's introduce some errors. I'm going to introduce an error right here, and we'll see what happens. Come on. Alright, if I load my project, perfect. So that jumped me right to this point, which that's not quite right. What I really should do is change where it's jumping me to, but besides that, it's correct. Right, I have to change where it's jumping me to, though. But yeah, it caught that, and that's good. There we go. Boop. Okay. So the problem there is I need to tell it, yeah, alright, let's take a look at where is log error. Begin string. So push error. Yeah, so PLB is commenting on the thing we were chatting about a little bit ago, and I'll throw in another thing, which is there's always two sides to an issue that you have to first develop. You have to develop both of them for yourself to start noticing the benefits of thinking in a certain way in this particular case. So the one problem is being able to have a good judgment call on when you are going to need to rewrite what you're writing to make it better on a second pass, right? When are you going to need to do more iterations on this thing, and when are you going to probably get it pretty close to right the first time or exactly right the first time, right? So you can get good at judging that, but then, even if you can judge it, what do you do about it? What point is there in knowing that I'm going to have to rewrite this again? Right? What can you do differently if you know that you're going to rewrite this again? If you never ask yourself, what do I do differently when I know I have to rewrite something, you'll never actually get any benefit out of thinking about that anyway. So you need to have not only a plan of, here's how I decide when I do and don't write them like the perfect thing first versus starting easy and iterating forward, but you also need to answer for yourself, when I detect that I'm in a situation where I'm writing a first pass that I'm going to replace, what practices do you adopt that are different from what you would have done otherwise, that will allow you to leverage that understanding, right? Because there are things you can do. For instance, I mean, it's hard to get specific, but you can just sort of see like, oh, there's no point in investing a day into writing a meta generator for this particular thing that I'm going to rewrite again anyway. I'll wait until I have the final the final form of this thing, and then I'll make the meta generator that does all of the little details that I was thinking about doing right now. Or you could also think about it in another way, which is if you've built a thing that you think is a first pass, then don't build too much on top of that, with the understanding that you're going to be you're going to be sweeping the legs from underneath all the stuff you've just built on top of it anyway, right? So you can decide to take a lighter hand in terms of what things you use on top of a thing that you know is a first iteration that hasn't been rewritten, right? And there's also like specific other things, like how detailed do you get in the allocation schemes, how detailed do you get in the data structures. These are all things they're like small details you just get used to thinking about what you find useful and what you don't find useful. That has a lot to do with the style you pick, right? There we go. Okay. Okay. So now I can pass in a position right here and say we're logging an error at a position, and then I'm going to say here's the position. And now the only trick is, how do I get the right position? Parser command. Compound. Okay. So before I advance past that brace, I want to grab the position of it. Wait, no, this isn't right at all. No, 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 no. That's all wrong. push error position, log error position. Yeah, it's not about the position of the compound that contains the problem, it's about the position of the element. Now, how do I want to do that? Okay, so that lets me get a position, and now when I'm doing the check, where does that position come from? It's inside of the element, or it's inside of the node L. It's inside the layout of the node. Oops, I didn't add a pathology to the file. I didn't need to rebuild. What am I thinking? Alright. Load the project. Doop. Okay, that made me look... I did a really silly face there because it took a lot longer than I expected. Jeez. Okay, now that's jumping me right here, whereas last time it jumped me right here, so that looks correct. That's what I wanted to see. Okay. So that's one of the two places where I wanted to introduce extra, helpful errors. What was the other thing I wanted? I felt like it was during actual extraction. There are certain places where if, especially during a project extraction, go to can emit command. Right, so if either of these Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. These are the three cases where I want to be able to emit an error that says a command must have a name field, a command must have a command field, like a CMD field, and a command field must have a matching command in it, or we skip the command. So in order to express those errors. I don't know about those errors until extraction time. It's like it's after parse. It can't be done in a purely grammatical sense. It has more to do with semantics. So I have to actually start doing the semantic processing of the data to discover that there's a flaw in it at this level. Discover there's a flaw at this level, right? So how do I emit errors here? I don't actually have an answer for that right now. So let's look at a couple of things. Config data. Right, so here's what we have to do. I mean, it's actually not that complicated. Go to finish command. We need to be able to emit we need to be able to log more errors. But I don't have a parse context anymore. Do I? Hold on. Let me look at config h. Where are my errors? Config, they're in the config itself. They're not in the context. So, what I really need, this is going to get interesting, is I need a version of this config parser emit error, log error, position, config log error position, because this is not in the parser anymore. And let's see if I can do, oh geez, okay, so hold on, let's back up. We have to look at how we push begin string. Yeah, we have to look at how we push errors first. So here we take the context. We're using that for an arena. First error, last error. Push back. Okay, so hold on. Are you telling me that the parser... Yes, so while we're parsing, the list is there. The list then gets moved to here, so it's two totally different types of push. Okay. Alright, fair enough. If these are going to have to be unrelated, then they're going to have to be unrelated. So, let's visit over here. Config parser. So before we do all this lookup assignment stuff, we're going to have the ability to add more errors to a config struct after the parse is done. So, I'm debating something in my head right now. So we're going to end up with duplicated code if we do this, because there's basically the same thing happening in two different ways. I think I want to avoid that. So we're going to do this. Parser config error list errors. Oops, I need a config error list, and then this can just say count last first, and then errors again down here in the config. And so we need to get, first of all the compilation errors that generates fixed. This is a matter of just a simple transformation. Whoops, don't do that. What did you do? Do that. There we go. Alright, so there we go. I've pulled out the idea of an error list as a structure, and now I can look up here where I implement how I push errors, and I can make the general version, which is going to look like this. Config error push, and that looks like this. It takes a partition called the arena, it takes a position, it takes a config error list called the list that it gets pushed onto, and it needs a file name. And then all of this stuff happens. So how do we do an error push? So we push onto the arena one error structure. We take from the list the first and last pointers, and we push that error onto it. We increment the list's count, and then we take the error, we set the file name into there, we set the position into there, and we return the error. So now this is just implementing, or just calling that and getting those parameters out of the context. So context errors, context file name, and position is passed in. There we go. Alright, very cool. And then we want to come down here where we talk about how to log an error. Yeah, so these want to be moved up here. Okay, I'm being a little bit indecisive, but I think we want something like config begin string takes a partition, config end string again is going to take one of these arenas in, and there we go. So we've just removed the dependency on the context, done the same exact thing we were doing, but no more context, because it was just providing an arena anyway. So let's just take the arena directly. And now, when we go to push an error at a position, nothing has to change. When we log an error, when we begin this string there, we're going to do that instead. And there we go. That's the only change we made. Was now when we call these, we have to provide an arena, so we pull the arena out of the context rather than pushing the context down and having the context arena be used at the lower level. So now our lower level construct doesn't depend on the context. So what we can do with that, we can do, yes, we can generalize how we log an error. So push error position is going to disappear. You're going to stay though. Config error. So let's see, this can just live up here. I mean, that doesn't even have anything to do with the config system anymore. That should just go into the string library at some point. Now, I'm not sure if anyone knows why I did that, but why are there even two separate calls? Why don't we just make this a part of the error push call? And so we do that work, and then we say, do this work. We do that, yep, okay. Just call that with the arena, call that with the arena. Yeah, so no problems there. Now none of this is necessary, and so we're just doing config error push, and so then we go context arena, context errors, context file name, position, error text. This guy still works the same way, and so that's how we push, how we log an error when we're using a parser context. But this is how we can log errors always. And so now we can come down here and say, okay, we're now ready to Enemy Mouse asks, out of curiosity, is 4coder running on a real-time game-like loop or a message blocking one? Message blocking, but it does animate sometimes. So, like the paste fade thing, for instance, you see that? When it, I don't know if you can tell, or like smooth scrolling, right? Whenever it's doing that stuff, it then becomes like a game loop where it does a 60 frames per second update. And basically what has happened there is every frame you say, hey, did you reach a point of rest, yes or no? If you say yes, then it stops doing that. If you say no, then it knows to push an event that will wake it up in the 60th of a second, or whatever the frame rate is set to, which I think it's 60 FPS right now. So when it's animating, it just automatically puts an event into its loop that wakes itself up every 60th of a second, just to be sure that it's hitting that animation. Or at least that's how it works on Linux. On Windows, it actually just doesn't block. It does like a sleep and wake up, and like non-blocking. It never does a blocking call on get message. It only does peak message when it is animating. So it works a little differently there. But yeah, basic idea: it's a game loop when it's animating, but most of the time it's a message blocked. And all you have to do to take it out of the other time it is this is just a deficiency of the Windows platform layer. The other platform layers don't have this problem, but when you have a child process running, even if it's not outputting anything, because if you have a child process running and it outputs some text, then it will trigger an event, right? And so that will cause an update to happen. That'll unblock it on the message thing. But on Windows, I didn't quite get that right, so instead what it does is whenever there's a child process running, even if it's not outputting anything on this frame, like right now if there's no message, it still just keeps on animating for as long as there's a child process running. So when you're on Windows, it's usually a good idea to not have the setup of, oh, I have a child process that runs in 4coder for a very long time without doing any work that the user needs to see. It's just because it means that 4coder runs like a game loop the whole time and burns your CPU a little bit. Now, when nothing is happening, it only takes like 2% CPU anyway to just re-render the frame, basically. But yeah, it's a little bit of a defect in the way child processes are still handled that I need to fix at some point. Okay. Config add error, I think is what I'm going to call this. And this takes a config directly, and with it an arena, and a position, and the error text. And what do we do here? We call config, we return the result of what we get when we call arena config errors. So there we go. We're leaning on the fact that we have one errorless struct there. Config file name. I'm not sure if file name gets stored in the config, but we can fix that pretty easily. Position and error text. So let's check real quick if the config has a file name. It doesn't. Like I said, nothing hard about fixing that. Config file name equals context file name. So there we go. Add. All right, we have an add error procedure now, which just requires that we have an arena sitting around that we're okay with allocating on, the config we want to add an error to, and the position where that error occurs, and the text for the error. So with all of that set up, hopefully we can make something happen here. Config add error. So we have an arena parsed. I'm not sure where the position is going to come from yet, so let's get that figured out. So we have this command list. Let me put this side by side with this real quick. So that's this. There's the compound, and if there's a failure, it's happening right here. So the failure would happen. Let's see. We get list. So this is a get result. So that's a compound. Now, does that get result node know where? Result, success, type. So this just contains the information about what is stored here. But I think I also want to be able to extract the position and stuff it right there. So we're going to have to do that. In order to do that, we're going to want to be able to say a get result, config get result. Where does that get used? What kinds of things can that be referring to? So we can get a get result from going to a var, or from evaluating an R value of any kind. Understood. Okay, I see what's happening. So, so the assignment, along with all this, needs to know the position where the assignment occurred. So let's make that happen first. Config.cpp. How do we parse an assignment? Here we go. So position equals config parser get position context. And then if we succeed at the other end, we will finally say that this position's position, or this assignment's position, is right here. Then when we do a get result type thing, something that gives us a get result, then in addition to all this other work we do, we want to say that the result's position actually comes directly from that assignment right there. So yeah, evaluate R value. We get that. So only problem with that is, okay, we need to do that right there. So if get result, yeah, if result dot success, then we want to do that. But that, okay, so what we really want to do is make this the inner, because I don't want to have this recursive function setting that over and over again. No point when it's so easy to just say, alright, grab this from the inner config assignment R result dot if result success there we go. Okay, so that will do what it has always done, get the result and not assign a position to it, and then finally, just on the very outside layer, the original assignment, the one we actually care about, assigns the position. Hold on. Actually, forget that. That's actually less helpful. Even though it's more correct, it's less helpful. We would want the error, even though the error is occurring right here in the sense that this is where the assignment, the fallacious assignment happened, the text that's messed up is somewhere else. So what we want to do is say that in this case here, where we actually hit a real thing, this is where we set the position. Okay, not from the outside, but from the inside. And this just recurses down, so if we succeed, we will have hit some other assignment that set the position. Okay, so now the only other thing to deal with is we have to make sure. Let's see, evaluate. Here it is, dummy assignment. If we happen to pull the position out from here, then we want it to be accurate. So to do that, we're going to look at the, let's see, there's an element that we are currently investigating, and this is the one we like, so L.position goes into the assignment's position, so that one will get extracted if we hit one directly right there. Okay, so that gives us positions inside of the get result here. And so now, if we go back to the project, add error, then it's inside the node result position that gives us the position, which I'm just going to pull out right up here. There we go. And now what's the error? A command must be assigned a string name. A command must have a name, a string type name member. Alright, now for this one, one's a little different. So here we're, right, okay. So what we actually want to do is, let me pull over the Configcpp. How do we do a compound member? That's how we do it? Okay. Config get result, command result equals config compound member, the config compound, wait, parsed source, var name, make lit string command at position 1, and that's it. That's the whole thing. And so that gives me command result. We're replacing this, by the way. If result.success, then we will set command set will equal command result.compound, but we also want to get command command string. Where's that getting used? That's getting used way down there. Right. So that should go there. Command set, command string, command. Okay, and then there's command position. Command position will come out of the position right here, and so that can go. oh, not quite. Else, we want to preserve that stuff. Okay, that can go now. And then here the position is the command position, and the error is no usable command strings found in command. There we go. Alright, let me catch up with the chat. Is it possible for us to write syntax highlighting packages for other languages with things as they are now? From what I can tell, the answer is kind of sorta if we create a new lexer as well. So the answer is no, unless it's very close to C. Then you can change the keyword set. So you can basically say, here's the set of keywords for this language, and the operators all parse the same. The preprocessor, like pounds, still parse the same, but the keywords will parse for the new language instead of for C or C++, which is not very useful. And if you write your own lexer, you can have indentation, but you can't have virtual whitespace or syntax highlighting be correct. Sorry, I'm replying to someone on the Discord real quick. Alright, back to it. So, what's going on here? Right. Alright, so let's give it a try. So to trigger one of those, I would need to add a problem like this. Let's do that one first, because that's the hardest one for me to get right. Most likely the one that's most likely to have the problem is that one. Okay, cool. So that's unusable strings found in command. So when I set that to win, and I'm gonna switch this over to let's just not have this in here at all. Perfect. And what's the error message right here? Perfect. Alright, so that is it. We have everything checked off again. So, that was an hour long of work. I'm going to go ahead and say let's keep plowing ahead and write the scripts for these tutorials, and then I will cut this stream off, and that'll probably be, I don't know. I'll surprise you guys. I might stream again. I might not. Who knows? Recording does take a while, but I got started late today, and I got up late today, so I have a lot of energy. So here are the tutorials I want to build. Oops, I just typed it into the chat. That was my mistake. So there's basically two tutorials. There's the how to use the new 4coder project system, and there's how to migrate your old 4coder projects to the new 4coder project system. Alright, so on this first one, how to use the new 4coder project system. The first thing I need to cover is you gotta put version 1 at the top. Get the boring part out first. Why am I putting all these in quotes? That's not helpful. If they're all going to be in quotes, then they might as well none of them be in quotes. Okay, so other things I need in this tutorial are the project name first of all, obviously, and then the patterns and the paths and then commands. Then I guess I will include fkey commands goes into that, but I also want to point out how to use variables. I want to point out how to use the errors. How to load a project. Hmm. Jim asked, did you change the listing of file types? I don't know what you mean. What do you mean by file types? Explain yourself. Yeah. Okay, so Jim's asking if I changed how you list extensions. Yeah, so this is the new style, this is the new style here. It's like an array with comma-separated strings, and each string is a wild-carded match pattern. So it doesn't have to be just extensions anymore, but you can do extensions using this, obviously. So what it used to be is you just had a string that was a string of extensions, and each period was a delimiter between the extensions, right? Now you can still get that effect by just only using wildcards for extensions, but if you wanted, you could use wildcards in other ways too. Um, so yeah, I did change that. Yep. The pattern system is meant to be the the replacement feature that gives you the same. It operates along the same axis, but gives you way more leverage than that, right? The set of things you can do with the extension thing is a subset of the set of things you can do with this, I guess I should say. Um, how to interpret your errors. How to run commands. Alright, so under here I want to put some subpoints. There's the pattern list, like I'll call it like the white list, and the black. Whoops, don't do that. And the black list. Under paths, there's the OS list. Matching OS list, OS matching. Then there's did you ever implement the text searchable commands and bindings? No, not yet. That's going to come in the next build, though. So the reason I haven't done that yet is because there's no good way to give you a list of like a narrowing list of options based on what you've typed in so far, right? So like you have like this where you can type in like I want 4coder underscore seek, right? And then it's narrowing the list down as you type. There's no generalization of that allows you to make something like that for commands that would be very useful. Like you would basically get this and you'd be like, what's the name of the command I want? Like, oh, you know, clean white space or whatever, and you'd have to just remember the name because there's no list, right? So the point is after the project system is done, I'm going to make a simple one-shot API that isn't meant to be like a full-on GUI system that you can customize, but just a thing that is just a list viewer call, basically. Like, here's the list that I want to create, here's the strings I want you to give me a list of, and, you know, go. And so once I have that, we'll go ahead and do stuff like that. And along with that, that will also include being able to rebind your project commands on the fly, jumping to different paths inside your project on the fly, etc. So, okay, under paths, there's with matching. Right, so then there's relative versus absolute paths, and there's recursive paths. Under commands, we need to talk about the how should I say this? Like the parameters or the settings, and then the command list with os matching. Alright. Yeah, okay, so that gives us the basic outline of my script for that tutorial, I think. So I do want to come up with some of the errors I want to demonstrate. So syntax errors, I want to show what it looks like when you get one of those. I want to show what it looks like when you have bad compound error, and then mistakes in command in particular, and then how you run commands. Now, how do we migrate old projects over? So the way we migrate old projects over, again, you gotta add version 1. Then you gotta say convert. Now I need an example of the old style of project. So where do I have the old style of project? So convert extensions to patterns. Add a blacklist. Oh, you gotta add a project name. Convert, or basically you want to do add a paths array. Just that. If you want this same behavior you've always had, convert fkey command os to command list, and fkey command there we go. So that's basically the stuff I want to cover in each video. So before I can do all that, I do need to get some files prepared. I'll probably actually do the preparations off stream, so I don't have to talk through it, but I will plan out what we need. So I need an example of a project with all features. How to do that? That was weird. See, I'm going to put this under files to prepare. To prepare. Okay, there we go. An example of a project with all features. and a couple of commands, or at least a few commands. An example of a project with each type of error. Several syntax errors. An example of an old style project and an equivalent new style version 1 project. Alright, so I have to prepare all that, and then I can record these. I'll probably want to transfer those to paper so that I can do one or two takes of them without having to pause in between a bunch. Then once I've recorded all that, I will probably come back online if it's not super late and if I'm feeling up to it, and start putting it together the video. Alright, so I think with that, I'm ready to shut down the stream. Let me double check chat one last time. I see, yeah, so Enemy Mouse, I agree, I like a system like that, and the plan is to basically, you know, get to that point, including the thing where you search the descriptions as well as the names as you're looking for matches for commands and operations that you can do and stuff. I want over time 4coder to become somewhat self-documenting to a certain extent. At least maybe not the custom layer part of it, but at least once you're done customizing it and you run it, it should be possible to use 4coder to help you learn even after you've customized it. Your customizations can even participate in this of finding your way to the things you want easily and learning how things work within it. That's sort of something I consider an important thing to get right eventually, but not as a part of the alpha. But as a part of the alpha, I will get at least a sort of command search kind of list thing in there. So I think that now is a good time to wrap up the programming for today. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow there will be some video editing. Maybe there won't be any video editing and you'll just see a build come out. I don't know. I'm just going to go with my mood now. But thanks for coming out and checking out the streams today, people. I'll be around. Bye-bye.